He had been sleeping in the parking structure for 11 days when the security guard found him. Not the underground levels. He had learned in the 2 months since he had been living outside which spaces were monitored and which were not. The third floor of the Meridian Tower parking structure had a maintenance alcove behind stairwell B that was dry and out of the wind, and that the overnight security rotation did not include in its standard sweep. He had found it on his 9th day outside, which was the day after he had understood that the shelter on Colfax was full and the one on Blake had a 3-week waiting list, and that the systems designed to help people in his situation were, at this particular moment, not available to him. He was not without resources. He had a laptop, an older one, charged at the public library each morning between 9 and 11 when the outlets were available. He had a phone with a prepaid plan he renewed monthly. He had the clothes he had been wearing the day the eviction had been finalized, plus one additional change he carried in a waterproof bag. He had, and this was the thing the security guard who found him did not initially know, a master's degree in urban systems planning from the University of Colorado and 12 years of professional experience in infrastructure development and public-private partnership management. His name was James Okafor. He was 41 years old. He had been, 18 months ago, the director of infrastructure planning for the city of Aurora. The 18 months between then and the maintenance alcove behind stairwell B were a story of the specific kind that happens to specific kinds of people at specific kinds of intersections. The intersection where a medical event meets a financial system that was not designed to absorb it. His wife, Adiz, had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition 14 months ago. The condition was treatable. Not curable, treatable. With a biologic medication that cost, at list price, approximately $6,000 per month. Their insurance had covered it for 6 months before reclassifying the medication as experimental and discontinuing coverage. The appeals process had taken 4 months. The appeals had been unsuccessful. James had done what people do when the systems fail. He had used everything he had. Savings, his 401k with the penalty. His wife's retirement account, the equity line on the house they had bought 8 years ago, the house that had been the physical evidence that the work of 2 careers and the patience of 2 decades could produce something stable. The medication had kept Adiz functional for 11 months. The money had run out in month 12. The house had gone to foreclosure. His city position had required, by municipal ethics code, disclosure of the financial situation and had produced a review process that had taken 3 months and cleared him of any wrongdoing and had also, by the time the review concluded, placed him in a different relationship with his employer than the one that had existed before. He had resigned rather than continue in an environment that had become, through no individual person's fault but through the accumulated weight of institutional process, untenable. He had been looking for work for 5 months. He had interviews. He had callbacks. He had the specific experience of someone whose resume is strong and whose circumstances are complicated, and who has discovered that the question of how to explain a gap that involves a medical crisis and a foreclosure and a resigned city position is one for which the professional world does not have good conventions. Adiz was staying with her sister in Colorado Springs. She was stable. She was receiving a generic version of the medication that was less effective but available. She called James every evening at 7. James sat in the maintenance alcove behind stairwell B and charged his laptop at the library and applied for positions and called Adiz at 7 and was careful not to let her know where he was sleeping. The security guard who found him on the 11th day was a man named Gerald Park. He was 54 years old, had been in building security for 20 years, and had the specific quality of someone who has seen a great deal of human difficulty and has developed, in response, not indifference, but a particular kind of practical compassion. The kind that asks what is needed rather than what is wrong. Gerald found James at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday, returning from the library before it closed for the night. He had his laptop bag over one shoulder and was walking with the specific purposeful movement of someone who knows they should not be where they are, and has learned to carry that knowledge without flinching. Gerald looked at him. James stopped. "I'm not going to call the police," Gerald said. James looked at him. "You have been in the alcove behind stairwell B," Gerald said. 11 days. I know because I check it, and because I have been deciding what to do about it." A pause. "What are you deciding?" James said. "That depends on who you are," Gerald said. "I have met people in that alcove before. Most of them needed a different kind of help than I can give. A few of them needed something I could actually provide." He looked at the laptop bag. "The library does not open until 9. You have been leaving at 6 and coming back at 9. What are you doing for 3 hours?" James was quiet for a moment. "Working," he said. "On what?" he told Gerald. Not everything. Not the full arc of the 18 months, but what he was working on. He was completing a proposal, a public-private partnership framework for urban infrastructure financing that he had been developing for 8 months, initially for his city role, and then after he had left, because it was the best work he had done in 12 years, and he was not going to stop because his circumstances had changed. Gerald listened. "Who is the proposal for?" he said. "I had a contact at Meridian Development Group," James said, "a vice president of urban planning I worked with on an Aurora project 3 years ago. I reached out 8 weeks ago. She agreed to look at the proposal." "Meridian Development Group," Gerald said. "Yes." Gerald was quiet for a moment. "This is Meridian Tower," Gerald said. James looked at him. "Your contact," Gerald said. "Her name?" "Susan Chen." Gerald Park had been working at Meridian Tower for 7 years. In 7 years, he had developed the specific institutional knowledge of a person who is present in a building every day and pays attention to everything: the rhythms, the tenants, the staff of the offices, the names and faces and roles of the people who moved through his lobby. Susan Chen was the vice president of urban planning at Meridian Development Group. She was on the 14th floor. She arrived every morning at 8:15 and took her coffee from the lobby cart with oat milk, which Gerald knew because he had been working the lobby for 4 years and he paid attention. He found her at 8:17 a.m. in the lobby. "Miss Chen," he said, "my name is Gerald Park. I am the overnight security supervisor. I need to speak with you about something that is not a security matter." Susan Chen was a precise and efficient woman who had become, through 15 years in urban planning, accustomed to receiving unexpected information and processing it quickly. She looked at Gerald. "Go ahead," she said. He told her, concisely and accurately, which was how Gerald did everything. Susan was quiet for a long moment. "He has been sleeping in our parking structure," she said. "Yes." "And the proposal he mentioned, the infrastructure financing framework? He said you agreed to look at it 8 weeks ago." "I did," she said. "I have been meaning to follow up. It has been—" She stopped. "Where is he now?" "In the maintenance alcove," Gerald said, charging his laptop before the library opens. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening to this story from. And if HeartLine Stories has moved you, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Every subscriber is an encouragement to keep these stories coming. Now, back to James. Because in 30 minutes he was going to walk into a meeting he had not been invited to and leave 14 people without words. Susan Chen came to the parking structure at 8:35 a.m. James was in the alcove with his laptop open. He stood when he heard someone coming and had already begun the calculation of which direction to move when he saw that it was not Gerald returning, but a woman he recognized from 3 years of professional interaction. He looked at her. She looked at him. There was a long moment in which neither of them said anything. "James," Susan said. "Susan," he said, "you are presenting your proposal to the board today," she said. He looked at her. "I have 14 people in a conference room at 9 o'clock, she said. "I have been meaning to contact you for 3 weeks. I kept—" She stopped. "You are presenting at 9 o'clock. Is the proposal ready?" "Yes," he said. "Then come upstairs." He did not go directly to the conference room. Susan took him to her office. She pointed to a chair. She went to a cabinet and produced a pressed shirt, a man's dress shirt, still in its packaging, the kind kept for client meetings when the unexpected happened, and she placed it on the desk. "There is a bathroom down the hall," she said. "I have 15 minutes." She left. James sat for a moment. He looked at the shirt. He looked at the window, at the city below, at the morning light on the buildings, at the street where he had spent most of the last 2 months sleeping in a different alcove before he had found the maintenance space behind stairwell B. Then he picked up the shirt and went to the bathroom. The Meridian Development Group's urban planning board was 14 people. Project directors, vice presidents, the company's head of development strategy, and 2 external advisors who sat in on major planning reviews. They had assembled at 9 o'clock for a review session that had been described in the calendar invitation as Infrastructure Financing, External Proposal Review. They had not been told who the external proposer was. James Okafor walked into the conference room at 9:03 a.m. He was wearing a pressed shirt and his own trousers and shoes and carrying a laptop bag. He had, in the 15 minutes Susan had given him and the 3 minutes she had spent briefing him on the composition of the room, composed himself completely. Not performed composure, achieved it. The specific quality of a person who has been through enough difficulty to know that the work is the work regardless of what surrounds it. He connected his laptop to the display. He said, "Good morning. My name is James Okafor. I am going to present a framework for public-private partnership financing in urban infrastructure that I have been developing for 8 months. I will need 45 minutes. And he presented. He was an exceptional presenter. This was not something that had emerged in the parking structure. It had been true for 12 years, the product of a career built on the specific skill of translating complex infrastructure economics into language that multiple stakeholders with different interests and different technical backgrounds could engage with simultaneously. He presented the framework in 3 sections. The first established the problem, the structural gap between municipal infrastructure funding capacity and infrastructure need, quantified across 6 Colorado metropolitan areas using data he had gathered in his city role and updated in his subsequent months of work. The second presented the framework itself, a financing mechanism that used staged private capital entry, public land value capture, and performance-linked returns to align incentives across public and private participants in ways that current models did not. The third was a case application, a specific infrastructure project in the Denver metro area that the framework could address and that current financing models had been unable to advance. The room was quiet throughout. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting for the presentation to end. The specific quiet of people who are paying complete attention. He finished at 9:51 a.m., 48 minutes. The head of development strategy, a man named Robert Hale who had been in infrastructure development for 22 years and who had the quality of someone who has seen many proposals and remembers the ones that were genuinely new, asked the first question. "The land value capture mechanism in Phase 2, Robert said. "You are using a municipal TEF structure, but the timeline assumptions in your model suggest an 18-month implementation window. That is significantly faster than any TIF we have implemented. What is driving that assumption?" James answered for 4 minutes. The answer was specific, technically sound, and drew on 3 case studies from comparable municipalities that he had researched in the library between 9 and 11 each morning. Robert Hale wrote something down. The questions continued for 37 minutes. Susan Chen found James in the corridor afterward. "They want to continue the conversation," she said. He looked at her. "Robert Hale would like a follow-up meeting with you and 2 of his directors," she said. He described the proposal as the most comprehensive treatment of the TIF alignment problem he has encountered in recent years. James was quiet for a moment. "Susan," he said. "Yes. I need to tell you something before this goes further. What Gerald told you this morning, my situation, I want you to know that it does not affect the quality of the work, but you should know it before you bring me into further conversations with your leadership." Susan looked at him. "I know," she said. "Gerald told me. I brought you into the room anyway because the proposal is the proposal and the work is the work." She paused. "Also, Robert Hale does not need to know where you have been sleeping. He needs to know what you know about infrastructure financing. Those are separate things." James looked at the corridor, at the window at the end of it, at the morning light on the city. "Yes," he said, "they are." The follow-up meeting happened the following Thursday. It produced an engagement, a paid consulting arrangement for James to develop the framework into an implementation-ready proposal for a specific Meridian project. The arrangement was 3 months, at a day rate that was more than he had earned in his city role. He called Adai's that evening, not at 7, at 4:30. She answered immediately, the way she always answered his calls now, with the specific alertness of someone who understands that the timing of a call carries information. "James?" "It is good news," he said. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear, in the background, the television at her sister's house, the specific domestic sound of a life that was temporarily located somewhere it was not supposed to be. "Tell me," she said. He told her. She cried. He had expected this. He waited. "How did it happen?" she said. "How did you get the meeting?" He thought about Gerald Park, about a security guard who had been deciding what to do for 11 days and had decided to ask a question rather than make an assumption. "Someone paid attention," James said. He booked a hotel room that night, the first bed he had slept in for 11 days. He slept for 10 hours. In the morning, he went to the library not because he needed to charge his laptop, but because it was where he had done his best work for 5 months, and it felt wrong to stop going simply because the circumstances had changed. He sat at his usual table. He opened his laptop. He continued the work. The work was the work. It had always been the work. Gerald Park was awarded Meridian Tower's Employee of the Quarter 4 months later. The citation described his conduct as exemplary and his judgment as exceptional. Gerald read the citation at the small ceremony in the lobby, folded it carefully, and put it in his breast pocket. He thought about a Tuesday morning at 6:15 a.m., about a man with a laptop bag coming back from a library before it opened, about the decision to ask a question rather than call anyone. He thought, that was not exceptional judgment. That was just paying attention. He went back to work. If this story reminded you that the circumstances a person is in are not the same as the person, and that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look past one to see the other, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have a story of your own, write to us at heartlinestories@dagmail.com. Every heart has a story worth telling. This is HeartLine Stories, where yours matters.